Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're excited to have over 400 registered attendees for today's webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Let's get started by giving one lucky attendee a Webinar Wednesday lunch bag for answering this trivia question. June is National Aquarium Month. Which state is home to the largest aquarium in the US? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard. While you're answering, I want to invite everyone to our full MD Expo conference, which will bring HTM professionals from across the nation to Seattle from October the 5th to the 7th, for 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in technology, products, and services. Registration is now open. For more details, it can be found at mdexposhow.com/Seattle. Okay, and let's see who the winner of our Webinar Wednesday lunch bag is. And it is, where are we? Oh, here we go. Harold Nash. Congratulations, Harold. The correct answer is actually Georgia. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, Nuvolo. Nuvolo is a modern, cloud-based EAM platform that meets the highest standards for ease of use, performance, and online and offline mobility capability for managing clinical equipment for healthcare providers. Visit nuvolo.com for more information. Our presenters today are Andrew Sweet, Director of Solution Consulting at Nuvolo, and Asim Rizvi, Chief Technology Officer at Nuvolo. Asim, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the introduction. I just want to thank everyone for joining and welcome to the webinar. What I want to talk about today with you guys is the focus around medical device cybersecurity and the problems in the industry that we're seeing associated with that, issues that we're trying to solve, and innovation that we're trying to bring to the table. Andrew's going to help me with that process. But before we actually get to that point, I just want to talk to you guys about the key areas that we're focused on as we see around the sort of the sector and the industry. The first one is purchasing, of course. So medical devices, especially connected medical devices, come in through multiple ingress points in the environment. And as they come in, sometimes inventory occurs, sometimes inventory does not occur. And it's very hard to get data associated with them. And actually, that they're secure from a patient record perspective, from a cybersecurity data perspective, before they're being used in the environment and possibly could be exploited. In addition to that, as that inventory is growing and is being maintained, those device details get lost over time across multiple systems, CMMS systems, as well as other ERP systems across the environment. And some data lives in one place, some data lives in another place. And capturing that medical device inventory over time is a difficult task. We've seen that across all of our research and customers, that is one of the main issues that needs to be solved around cybersecurity for medical devices. And in addition to that, as you go along with it, there's multiple systems across multiple hospitals. As groups get together, those systems need to be consolidated. Half of the inventory is in one place, half of the inventory is in another place. Those multiple CMS systems then need to really work together or be consolidated in some way to be able to get a holistic view of the data and solve medical device cybersecurity issues. We solve that issue. We look at that issue as a key fundamental pivot for making sure that medical devices can be secure. And finally, now I've got all my inventory. I understand the device details. They're consolidated in one place. I've got some processes that are aligned for ingress, as in onboarding of those devices and purchasing, and outgress, as in those devices leaving the environment when they're good to go. I also want to ensure while I'm running those devices, I have an understanding of what's going on with them from a traffic perspective. That's where integrations come in. Integrations focus on security across the ecosystem as those medical devices are operating in the environment. Being able to not only bring that data into a platform where I can view it, but also being able to take actions-based data. Hey, this MRI scan is, this MRI is sending scan data to an IP address that we don't understand. I really want to find that out as soon as it's happening, and then be able to go ahead and react to it immediately with either a work order or an action that I can orchestrate in my EAM system so that I can truly handle that. So that's at a high level, purchasing the ingress and outgress of those devices in the environment, keeping track of the device details, truly technical data associated with the devices, being able to then bring that inventory and data into a single place so I can look at it across the board and be able to take action and do service against that, and then being able to integrate with monitoring systems and the ecosystem to be able to understand day to day, minute by minute, second by second what's truly happening with those devices and orchestrate solutions, workflow against those events. I'm going to hand it off to Andrew here with more in-depth about the things that we provide in the space and how we handle these issues.
Great, thank you, Asim. My name is Andrew Sweet. As Linda introduced me, I'm the Director of Product Management here at Nuvolo. I'll be taking us through a few more slides just to talk about our approach to the solution and then into the live product demonstration as well. So as we just talked about, as Asim mentioned, we're trying to address those core areas, and this is how our approach differs from our competitors and other people in the industry. Is as the enterprise asset management system, we're used to handling medical device from RFP, RFQ, RFI procurement processes through when it is received at the loading dock and inventoried into our system, through the full life cycle of that device as it gets put into patient care, in use for patient care, and until it's retired. As part of that, we're focusing on helping you secure those devices through several things. First, improving the physical inventory, whether that's through our inventory services where we can send a team out and do a physical inventory, or for many customers that's not really feasible from a cost standpoint. So we can do things like when we issue corrective or preventative work orders to the biomedical engineer, we can automatically include a checklist that has to be completed, a working actionable checklist to collect that additional cybersecurity profile data from the device while they're handling it for normal corrective or preventative maintenance. So we take two approaches there, either the jump team kind of come on site, do a physical inventory, make sure we've got a full and rich inventory of the details we need to correlate security for that device and manage security for that device. Obviously, no matter how great your inventory is, it's just a static inventory if you don't keep it up to date. So we focused next on, integrating with those best of breed security tools, whether it's firewalls, Rapid7, Qualys type, vulnerability scanning, which typically those have limited use because firewalls only typically see things going out of your network. They can catch things like malware, systems attempting to reach malware sites and things. And of course, the Rapid7 Qualys systems do a very good job of scanning for vulnerabilities on devices and being able to do that scanning, not usually while they're in use by patients, but in offline, both during the procurement cycle as well as just in the life cycle of the device, reevaluating devices as they're upgraded, et cetera. Those are two pieces, but more importantly is the real-time monitoring, the ability to pull in a Zing box or Cloud Post or a Simile type solution that provides real-time passive, packet analysis based observed behavior monitoring that can not only tell what's normal for a device, so even if it's not showing an overt traffic pattern of a known virus, the fact that your MRI control workstation starts trying to talk to a device in your adjacent network that it never talked to before is also an indication of a security problem. If nothing else, maybe the person at the console is trying to do something nefarious. So integrating with those best of breed tools allows us to take in those events, process them in this context of that enterprise asset lifecycle management that we have the full data on the device. We know when it was purchased, what department it's in, and if it generates PHI data, et cetera. And not only taking in their events, but sharing that rich data model from the enterprise asset management system back into those systems to enhance their ability to do impact assessment, vulnerability prioritization, et cetera. So once we take in those events, we enrich the source system, but we also can orchestrate and automate the actual resolution of those things in the sense of dispatching work orders, integrating with security operations systems, et cetera, to make sure that this is a cohesive workflow and we act as that system of action to remediate and correlate that across the rest of your inventory as well. And we'll talk more about this, but the end result is today, IT technology and security systems tend to be very poor at identifying those medical devices on your network. So you can run those vulnerability systems in the traditional network security and monitoring systems, and with the exception of some of the players, as I mentioned, in the cloud posting box assembly space that are tailored towards identifying medical devices, the vast majority of those will get, at best, an IP address, at least an IP and MAC address for the device that's misbehaving or that appears to be exploited or have a vulnerability. They may not get more than that. You know, Zingbox and Cloud Post and Assembly can do a better job of getting, you know, it's a GE MRI or it's a CareFusion, you know, this, that, or and sometimes a model, even a version number. Regardless of that, the things they can never get off the wire is, you know, they get those, do those events, they forward them up to either their own console or a security operations console. And of course, the poor person in the security and IT team who knows he works for a healthcare delivery organization. So he's like, well, I absolutely know that this, because these systems didn't identify the device very richly, it's almost certainly a medical device. I have generally no idea what kind of device it is. It's an IP or a MAC address. They don't know where it's at in the building typically, beyond a rough VLAN saying it's on the 3rd floor somewhere. They don't know what department owns it. Is it oncology, radiology, pediatrics? They don't have a contact at that department, and they certainly know they're not going to be allowed to touch the device themselves, most likely to remediate the problem. What we're doing is we're acting as the system of enrichment and engagement and action for those events. So we can take in those events from those various systems, and the more the better. You don't have to pick one. It doesn't have to just be, you know, a Cloud Post type product. We could take events from your firewalls, from your intrusion detection systems, from, you know, Cloud Post or Zingbox or Assembly. We take those in, we run a rules-based identification algorithm that lets us identify the device or devices that are affected by the event or vulnerability, then kick off remediation workflows. So, you know, generate a work order or investigative work order for a biomed to go work with the vendor to fix it, to get a patch or configuration change or re-image it, whatever the necessary resolution is. And then, of course, orchestrate the next steps, which is enriching the original event, sending it back to the source systems and or up to the security teams, security operations or SIM system, with all of the real-time business information they need. You know, the RTLS location, the serial number, the owning department and contact info. You know, all this is just a subset of the data in this example, but whether it generates PHI data or stores PHI data. Obviously, the security context of the event varies quite significantly in impact and priority based on those factors that the security systems will never know. But as an enterprise asset management system, we have all of that data tracked. So we forward that on. Now the security person or IT person knows the full device information, the clinical work order number for the biomed who's already been dispatched to begin the remediation, the business and clinical engineering contact, and they have only to monitor that work order, and when it gets completed, verify with the technology systems that the problem truly is resolved. That's a win for them. It's also a win for the biomed, because now when they get that work order, it's not based on IT calling them saying what device is at this IP address. It's trying to contact a botnet or some other malware type scenario. They get an email, they get a work order with the full technical details they need to work with both the security teams internally and the vendor to identify, you know, a patch, configuration change, or mitigating controls to remediate that. What this gives us, and this is the last slide before we jump into the live product demonstration, is it gives us the ability to enrich the clinical device inventory so we can take in discovery events from all those technologies, those monitoring, scanning, and firewall systems, so that if the device isn't in inventory, we can make sure it gets onboarded properly. As part of that, and we'll demonstrate this in the live demo, we can enforce, you know, both clinical and security policy checklists and procedures to make sure they get onboarded correctly and per your policy in an auditable, recordable way. We're, vendor agnostic for our part. We can take network discovery and monitoring events through our integrations with strategic partners like CloudPost, Box, and Simile, or any other system that you've already purchased or have in place, like your firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, etc. And of course, we can then, taking in that data, both enrich those systems' value by providing them contextual data they won't have, but also be the vulnerability assessment and correlation engine. Because they may find, we may get a problem on the network or a vulnerability come up, but they don't know that you have 20 more of that make and model sitting in a stockroom shelf that aren't powered on right now. We do know that. So we're going to be that system of record in action. So that was it for slides. Let me just pause for a moment while I shift gears and get out of the PowerPoint and into the live product demonstration. So as we pick up here, we can see the dashboard I have up. So this is our medical device cybersecurity dashboard. I'm going to start actually at the bottom of the dashboard here. So as I mentioned, through these integrations with the best of breed technology partners, we have the ability to take in 3 basic types of information. Discovery, so a system detects something new on the network. They forward that event to us. Of course, if the device was properly onboarded and your human and business processes were followed, we should know about it. We should be able to say, yep, we know about that device, we've identified it, and then take action on that, update the device profile, etc. If the device isn't known to us as the enterprise asset management system, that's a people process or business process failure. So we want to track those. So let's talk about first what happens when that comes in. So when a detection comes in, a discovery type event comes in, if we can't correlate it to the inventory, if we're not aware that that device is out there, and it indeed is out there, of course, because some of these systems are seeing it on the network, we'll get an event that comes in, we'll create a temporary device record, which I'm bringing up here in another tab. This record is going to give us whatever information we gathered from the third parties. This could be as rich as this example where it has a vendor. We identified it's a GE. It's an OEC 9800, which is an X-ray piece of equipment. So you see that classified here as well, asset type. We also get, of course, its technical information, when it was first discovered, what its IP was or is at this time, because we can continuously get these discovery events to keep this record up to date. The MAC address, the host name, potentially a VLAN, discovery profile, etc. This allows us to have an initial record. Obviously, this is not a complete asset record. This device needs to be onboarded properly. So we're going to generate a work order. As you see here under the clinical work orders for this device, we're going to say, well, we know it's a medical device. So we're going to generate a clinical work order. That work order looks like this. It's a device verification work order, a special work order type. Gives the information. This is a link back to, so I can either hover over or click on this to see the details collected, from the initial discovery, or I can navigate to it, of course. The purpose of this is for the technician to go out and make sure that this device gets onboarded per your policy. And as you can see across the top, there's several life cycle steps to this. It's been opened automatically and assigned through assignment rules to the appropriate group. This could be a clinical team or a security team, to your preference. The next step is the pre-check checklist, which you can see here. And what this is we're telling them, hey, before you start to go work on this, to find this, coordinate with the security team and prepare an asset tag, because the device probably doesn't have one if it's not in inventory. This is a completely configurable checklist. This is just my example of a pre-checklist to tell the technician what they need to prepare to begin the work. Of course, if I submit that, that goes into the system. It allows me now to move it to the next state, work in progress. So I'll do that, save it real quick. So now that the work orders from work in progress, I can also enforce a working checklist. In this case, I've populated into my demo system my 13-step OWASP medical device security onboarding process, which is an industry standard, best practice. Have you identified the device? Yes. Is the device an approved device? Maybe this is a device that if you're teaching hospital, for example, that a researcher came in on a grant and brought equipment with them, and it's actually not a device that you feel is secure and within policy. So you might leave that no and stop the process. We're going to go ahead and say, okay, we did all these things, we backed up the firmware, we've checked for secure protocols are turned on if they're available, like SSL, TLS. We've verified this, we've brought it on board. Now, of course, I would also typically complete the device profile. I'm not going to take the time to do that here, but I would go back here and fill in all the data once I've found the device and identified its serial number and asset tag that I put on it, etc. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just close the work order to show the next step here. So I have to do a couple things, just some of our out-of-the-box mandatory validation, saying, what was the resolution code, and what did I do? I onboarded the device. Now, all of those checklists come in here as verification data. So I can prove that I onboarded this per my clinical processes as well as my security policies. So in this case, you can see the checklist name, the question, who answered it, at what time, and what the value was. And this could be yes, no, true, false, or record a value, like what's the software version. It could be any kind of information that you want. Checklists are 100% user definable, and they're applied by our rules engine, so dynamically. So any work order could have any number of checklists to gather data or make sure standard operating procedures are followed. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and just say that I worked on it right now. Close this out. So when I save this, of course, it's going to mark it as closed complete. The work order's done. And you'll notice back here on the asset, the little blue indicators indicate that it was updated while I was on the other tab. So it's no longer pending verification. It's moved to an installed state, and the installation date has been set. So this is an integrated life cycle. Now, if I did my job right, I've gathered the barcode serial number, I've onboarded the device properly, and the work order's done, the device is permanently in my inventory now, and the normal life cycle management happens, preventative maintenance and everything. Now, I can also trend this, because of course, when this happens, this is again a process failure. Somehow, someone didn't follow the process. When the device was purchased, it didn't get inventoried, or when it was inventoried, it didn't get a complete profile entered. No one powered it on and actually got the technical details into the system. For whatever reason, we didn't know about it, and we can trend this across our organization. So I have a number of facilities here in my organization. Worst offender looks like Dallas, so let me filter it to that. Now I can see that based on that filter, I can see the cadence at which I've had discovery, so how many devices per month I've discovered, and I can click into these if I want to actually get to those 5 device records. I'm going to stay here for a minute, but I can also see where they were discovered by department. So in this case, sterile central supply, well, that makes sense because they're powering devices on and running sterilization fluids and things through them, so they're going to show up on the network for the first time when they're processing them. Great, let me hide that and see what the next most frequent occurrence is. Well, the ER, interesting. Maybe I want to click in here and see those 2 devices that were found on the network in the ER, because and I go in, I research these obviously and investigate it for root cause, figure out why my processes are being followed. In this case, say a nurse with the hustle and frantic nature of ER, sometimes an infusion pump got knocked over. It got physically broken. They call the biomed team. They grab one off the shelf, assuming it's been inventoried. They do their testing and set it up, and they bring it out, give it to the nurse, not realizing it never got put into inventory. It was actually a new unit sitting on the stockroom shelf. So, again, identify people, process failures. You should see a diminishing line here, of course, over time as you educate and train and improve processes. The goal being so that every device gets onboarded as part of the procurement or ingress process if it's coming with researcher, et cetera, so that these don't become surprises, that there aren't any more events happening where things aren't known to the enterprise asset management system. Now, the next type of information we can take in is actual security events, vulnerabilities and exploits. So we'll talk about exploits first, active attacked vectors first. So here we can see our initial display is how many of these were moderate, critical. Looks like I didn't have any high, just critical and moderate, nothing in between. And of those critical events, I can see when they happen. Again, I can click in any of these data points to get to the individual events that happened in February, for example, and whether they were active exploits, meaning an active hack attack, or we noticed this errant behavior and it happened yesterday or last night and it came up. So we can take in events of various types and categorize them. We can see in this case, this particular instance is integrated with CloudPost and Zingbox, so you can see events coming in from them at different times. Of course, active events show up right here, and I'll open one of these and talk more about what the life cycle and workflow for an event is within our system. So within our system, we're going to do several things. Of course, we're going to first create an event record, which I'm pulling up right now. This is going to be basically the master record for this event, not for one device, but for the entire event. So apologize for the delay, just bandwidth issues here on my part, I guess. This is not the product. It's just my demo instance being a little slow, or the browser. We'll give it a moment. There we go. I don't know why that took so long. So this is a typical security event. It's got an initial status of new. I can, change this. I probably should have changed this to assign because I've already assigned someone to it. So in my previous demo, apologize for that. So it's in assigned state. It's routed to an assignment. It's assigned to a group and an individual. It has the active exploit flag is true, meaning this is an ongoing attack. I can see the data source. I can see its priority based on the sending system typically. I can see the full details. So it's a security alert for this device due to malware site access, and it gives me the details here that the device tried to go out and contact this malware server in China. Here's a detailed link for the organization that first discovered this malware to give you an idea of what it does. You can see a link here back to the monitoring system, CloudPost in this case. We then correlate the device across the inventory. So in this case, the event came in, it said just one device, and I can click that and see what that device is. So looks like a Plum 360 infusion pump in this case. And I can, of course, click into this record further to see the full device details. But for now, I'm just going to look at, okay, what do we do about this? So the first thing we do is we create what we call an affected asset record. And this is a permanent record, an audit record, that at this moment in time, this event happened and it affected this asset. So that's just an audit record. The next piece is, and you can run reporting to see, trending. We'll talk more about that, about why we record that. Also, we create a work order to get this immediately, active attack or immediately exploited or vulnerable system remediated, patched, upgraded, mitigating controls put in, etc. So this is the work order we're going to generate. It's a security-related alert due to non-conformance. We're going to have the real-time or fixed location, if it's not a portable asset, based on RTLS tags. So the technician can come here and say, okay, I know where is this. I'm going to click this. It'll open a new tab. It'll show me right on my own floor map exactly where this is. So it's in my Denver hospital, floor 1, and it's in this room named R1R10. So I know where it is. I know where to go. I also get, of course, as the biomed, the full information. And again, this is rules-based routing. We could send it to the biomed group in my example, or to a security or hybrid biomed security team, and even to an individual if you want to assign to an individual. The point is it gets dispatched immediately, it gets located, it gets remediated, even if that remediation is just to get it unplugged so that it can't spread throughout the network, whatever this malware is. And then, of course, work to remediate it. Of course, whatever the outcome of that work order, whether it's a patch, a configuration, etc., it's going to need to be applied to every other like device in inventory. So we're going to do several things. In this case, this had an active exploit. So we can integrate with security operations teams here. And in this case, I've actually created we're based on the ServiceNow platform. So I've created, as part of my workflow, an integration into ServiceNow security incident response. And I'll show this work order here. So this is ServiceNow security incident response managed by the security incident response team. We've populated this. We've scored it for business impact and priority properly. It's, shows up as a configuration item, which is their generic term for an IT or other asset. In our case, of course, because it's a Nuvolo device, it's going to give them a clinical device interface here, not a laptop or computer or server fields. So they're going to get the relevant information they need. We're going to also, of course, give them the details, send them, set the description to something meaningful, provide an additional tab with links back to our event source, the actual master event, the data source, the brief description, who this event is assigned to, and who the support group is normally for that clinical device. So this is that better together. The security team gets this. It's already in work. They know who's working on it. They understand the context of the event. they can just follow up with you when it's complete, or we can update this system when the work order is complete to tell them to revalidate that the problem is resolved based on the the security monitoring and scanning tools. So again, better together story ties in the teams in a shared workspace. This is a shared workspace. It's not part of our clinical asset management application. It's not part of a security product. So both biomeds and security can see this module within Nuvolo. Of course, we're going to create a vulnerability because this event might happen again in 2 months, and we want to be able to correlate all of the times this event has happened across our inventory. And then we're going to go out and we're going to say, look, this, in this case, CloudPost told us about this one device that's actively got malware, behaviors, but you have 59 more devices in inventory that are the same model, make and model, at the same or older software, firmware, and patch level. So for each of those, we're going to generate a vulnerable asset vulnerability record, and we're going to generate a work order to ensure that those get remediated. Now, we can do two things here. We can create individual work orders, or we can create a central work project that you can see all the affected assets and generate work orders 10 at a time, as you can handle the workload to go patch them. And of course, whatever the remediation was on the parent event, which is linked here, as the asset vulnerability is linked back here, which links to the master event, of course. So we know what the vulnerability was. We understand if there was a patch or whatever the remediation was for the initial device. We can apply that again to all of these subsequent devices that are also vulnerable. So even if those devices were sitting in a stock room and had never been powered on, as long as they were inventory as part of the procurement process, we're going to be able to do that correlation across them and be able to tell you holistically what your exposure is to this exploit. Now that's one type of exploit, of course. There's multiple types of exploits. There's active monitoring systems like that, which we just looked at. We also, bear with me for a minute while I add a favorite here. Somehow I lost my favorite. We also, in our EM security module, handle things like MDS2 assessments and location storage for all your MDS2 forms. We of course have all those events historically, as well as the active events here that we just looked at. The affected assets, so we can do reporting and filtering and anything on this, and we'll talk more about the reports in a minute. Any exploited vulnerabilities. So if we had a vulnerability and it was actively exploited, it's going to show up here. Of course, all of these Zingbox CloudPost alerts fall into that category. But we also do other types of vulnerabilities. So we integrate with the National Vulnerability Database. So we pull in NVD vulnerabilities like WannaCry. And as an example, I'll bring up WannaCry. Let me turn on my search bar here. So WannaCry's ID is 2017-0144. Unfortunately, I know that by heart. Bringing it, actually, it's brought up in another tab, but so this is what a typical national vulnerability database feed looks like. Great, I've got an ID, I've got a really high threat score, vulnerability score, which is pretty horrible basically. And it's horrible because it doesn't take physical access to the device to hack it. You can hack it over the network. It doesn't take an experienced hacker, medium skill base here. It doesn't require them to compromise one or more of my employees' credentials to do this exploit. And if they successfully exploit a device with this vulnerability, they have complete confidentiality impact, meaning they can get all the PHI data or any other kind of data off the system. They have complete integrity impact, meaning they can load new software on the device, not just cause it to not behave properly. And of course, they can take the device completely offline. And if that's, treating a patient, it's going to stop working. So that's why the 9.3 score. This is a typical National Vulnerability Database type feed. But the problem with this is, great, this tells me that this piece, this component of a Microsoft operating system is the vulnerability. How do I know what products in my medical device inventory, even though I know I have some Windows-based products, I don't know which ones have this version of this Windows component. And that's where we take it a step further. So we can go into that component, see not only that it has 5 other vulnerabilities, that those vulnerabilities span these Windows versions, explicit versions, patch build levels, service pack levels, etc. And then we can either on demand with this link create a scan for vulnerabilities and identify the medical devices in my inventory, in this case these 13 devices. I'll open one of these as an example, that are vulnerable to WannaCry. Now imagine if you had this in February of last year when NIST published the vulnerability for WannaCry before anybody got hit by it. Then we can run these on nightly scheduled jobs to say scan my inventory for anything new from NIST, any new national vulnerability database entries, and based on this common platform enumeration identity, we can say, yeah, this absolutely is vulnerable or not. Of course, no false positives here. It's a whole algorithm that NIST publishes for this that we've implemented. So that's the other kind of vulnerability correlation we can do. The end result of that, if I go back to my dashboard here, collapse the side panel as well, let it load, is that we can not only respond to events like we talked about here with active exploits, active security events that are detected in the environment, but also we can track, trend, and analyze the vulnerabilities. So initially my graph here is which of the events, of all the events I've seen, how many were correlated, meaning these 98 came from a third-party source, a firewall, an intrusion protection system alert, you name it, CloudPost, Zingbox. 98 devices were affected by those type of events. But we also correlated 252 other like devices in inventory that were vulnerable, either through NIST matching or through correlating those events from live systems like CloudPost, and dispatched work orders or work projects to make sure they got remediated as well. Now we could see that and trend that over time, in this case by manufacturer at the top graph here, and by asset type. So we can see I had 57 Hospira devices in January that came up as vulnerable. And 57 of those were infusion pumps. So those were all infusion pumps. We can look here and see I had 60 CareFusion Pyxis brand devices in May. Of those, 48 were pill counters and 12 were medication management system workstations. So that makes sense as well. And of course, all of these are live real-time graphics. So if I want to, filter out Hospira and CareFusion Pyxis, what's my next worst offender? Well, looks like I had some Becton Dickinson stuff here, 12 things. And if we filter out, pill counters here, you scroll down. I need to make this graph a little bigger. What was it? Well, probably, yeah, contrast injectors, I guess. So anyways, all this analysis, you can drill into these. I can go see what were those 12 devices. So if I click that, it's going to take me right to the list. Here's the 12 devices, the 12 asset vulnerabilities rather, and their related devices. And of course, I can see everything about them, what the vulnerability was, what the make, model, asset number. I can click right into this to go directly to the asset record. I can see everything about it, its history, when it was last updated, all the work orders that are against it. Everything's one click away for me here. So this allows me to do several things. It allows me to, enrich my inventory with those discovery type events, make sure my inventory stays accurate and complete. Again, coming back to the bottom here, making sure that devices that are known on the network are known in the inventory and properly onboarded. It can allow me to assess vulnerabilities against my entire inventory, either through national vulnerability database type feeds or any of the third-party systems that you have, vulnerability scanners, obviously the CloudPost and the real-time type systems like that, and of course deal with those real-time events as well. So we've covered both vulnerability management as well as event or exploit management here. And again, all of these things allow us to roll this in under our either exploits or vulnerability here, give you categorical reporting here, easy, let me see every asset that's affected. Let me group those by manufacturer. How many? So I've had 3 CareFusion ones. Great. Okay. I've had 5 GEs, right? Or come in here and say ungroup and filter this. I just want to see things that happened since March, right? So we'll say events that were created on, or I should say on or after, at or after, and I can either pick a day, like March 1st, let's say. Great. Run that. I've now got a custom report. So I've had these many events, these many asset alerts, I should say, since March 1st. Very easy to trend this, very easy to create, bar charts and pie charts and create a custom report based on this or export it to spreadsheets to do any further analysis. And that's true of, affected assets, exploited vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities themselves, so every asset vulnerability that's ever been recorded historically, correlation to the, the actual NIST vulnerabilities or Cloud Post Sandbox Assembly type reported vulnerabilities. You can see a mix of them here, correlated to the vulnerable software components. So these would be the, the Windows exploit, the module of Windows. So I can come in here, I can search through this through any number of perspectives, and everything's one click away linked. So very, very easy to get in depth here and understand all of the different facets of the devices I have, the data model. And then the last thing I'll show here, all of this is happening within a Nuvolo enterprise asset management data model that is completely aware of the relationships. And I'm going to bring up an example asset here. Give me just a second here. Oh, I've got a lot of records being displayed here. I'm going to speed this up by making this 10 records per page instead of 500. There we go. So I can come in here and say, pull up a specific asset that I know is a complex asset. I can come in and not only see, events and work order history for assets, but I can understand the context of this asset. Not all assets are standalone equipment, right? So I can see technical details. I can see, vendor, make, model, customer, but I can also see the logical relationships between this, in case this is a magnet, the actual magnet unit of an MRI, but it also has a control computer, that's managed, that the operator uses to control it, and that's an HP device in this case. It also sends data to ICN image processing servers, in this case made by Dell. All of these are in the context of this device, including the location that supports the device. So if I have an HVAC failure that impacts this location, I know it's impacting this MRI as well. And all of these things, both components of the system. So for example, this MRI has a magnet monitor. That's secondary asset that has its own full life cycle in our system, but it's related because it's a component of this system. Surface coils, etc. All of this is part of the overarching data model, and this is how, knowing these relationships, being able to report and navigate and understand the context of a device allows us to do not only the correlation about software version and things, but also the impact and risk analysis. So we can come in here and see things like, here's that device, here's the related assets and location. I can go say, what else is in that location? This is demo data, so this isn't going to be very realistic. But I can see, oh, that location housed these other assets as well, right? Or it has, HVAC resources or power conditioners or any other kind of asset within our enterprise asset management system. So just wanted to give that last piece of detail. Coming back to the dashboard here, coming back to the high level, we've talked about taking in discovery events, taking in security events. Oh, the one piece I didn't mention, we also can take in utilization data. So both from companies like Sandbox and Cloud Post that can tell by intercepting the packet traffic, the HL7 and DICOM protocols that, oh, that MRI just did a scan, or that infusion pump, just was set up to treat a patient. It's in use now. So we can not only flag devices as in use or not in use, but we can also get telemetry data for them, such as how many scans, how many hours of use, event details like low battery alarms can be intercepted from the HL7 protocol, and we can create work orders to dispatch those on a predictive basis so that, hey, the low battery alarm at 50%, we don't do anything about, but we know between the time the 50% alarm comes in and the 20% alarm comes in, that's typically about 2 hours. So, or 2 hours from between them, and then the device usually dies within an hour. It goes off the network, right? The battery fails. So if these things aren't being addressed, we can create work orders to make sure they're proactively addressed based on those device metrics and utilization data, as well as preventative maintenance based on utilization data. And then lastly, we can take in the, so we talk about discovery, device metrics and events, and then of course, the events themselves, the security events. So security, discovery, and device metrics. So that was all I had to present. We're going to open the floor for questions, and Linda, if anybody's asked any questions, we're happy to address those.
Okay, we have actually. Thank you so much, Andrew. The first question is, I know my medical device inventory is not accurate or complete. How can Nuvolo help that?
Great question. So just like we showed on the device onboarding work order, the checklists, we can do checklists that say, every time any kind of work order gets generated against a device, whether it's corrective or preventative, just the next time any biomed touches that device, gather these other 10 fields, right? Make sure that we have the MAC address off the back label or the admin screen on the control screen on the device. Make sure we've accurately captured the software version level. So we can incrementally help with improving the inventory access through business processes like that, and of course through the technology integrations. So obviously, things like network identification data can be gathered by any number of those third-party systems I mentioned, and we can take those feeds and just automatically update the record in the system, based on a rules engine. So we can choose what we trust from various systems and take automated actions to keep that inventory current. Of course, we also offer, as I mentioned, discovery team type. We can send a jump team in and do an inventory for you and make sure that it gets current on a building by building or campus by campus basis. So those services are also available. Other questions, Linda?
Okay, yeah. How can Nuvolo orchestrate or automate remediation actions when there is no manufacturer patch to fix a device vulnerability?
Great question. So it probably never happens to any of you in the audience, but sometimes there isn't a patch available. The device is at the current latest, greatest software firmware, and it's still vulnerable. In those cases, depending on your technology partners, we can flag the device in our system with the click of a button to say request mitigating controls, and then we'll feed that back to the designated system of control for that device, whether that's cloud post doing micro-segmentation, for example, or the firewall to implement additional firewall logic to sandbox that device better to protect it against that particular vulnerability. So we have multiple options. That does vary, of course, based on your technology mix, what security enforcement systems you have, IDS type systems, etc. But we absolutely have that mechanism built in to be able to say, hey, flag this device, make sure it gets mitigating controls, and automate that, that feedback to the system of control rather, and ensure that happens. Okay, and that's a bidirectional integration, by the way. So when Cloud Post, let's say, implements the micro-segmentation, changes ACLs and things on the switch to protect that device, they update our system so right back here in the asset management system that those controls have been implemented.
Okay, great. And I've got quite a few questions actually now. Can pop-up alerts be configured to inform the user that empty fields need to be populated?
Absolutely. So anytime in our system that you want to make a field required, I'll just bring up that device inventory record here. So if whatever you want the last audit date field to be mandatory, we can simply make that a required field or do a rules-based. Right here we have a system called UI policies. So we can just define a policy that says that's a mandatory field. And even if it's not populated yet, the next time someone goes to edit this record, they have to populate it. Or again, we can do checklists or other things on the work orders to make sure that the data gets collected and populated.
Okay. Can data from any EAM inventory be used in Nuvolo?
No, this solution is, of course, based on our underlying data model for correlation and understanding of the relationships. So we don't have any way to separate the cybersecurity piece from our enterprise asset management underlying capabilities. You do need to be a Nuvolo enterprise asset management customer for clinical devices to be able to use the security solution.
Okay. Now, if you see an attack, can you firewall all devices to keep it from spreading?
And that's exactly what I was talking about with the mitigating controls. So yes, we can, we are not going to be the one to change your firewall rules. We're going to rely on our technology partners for that. But absolutely, there's partners that can do that, they can either automate that. That's kind of scary. Doing any kind of network controls on a device that's in use by a patient is an inherently high risk operation. So the workflows we have out of the box are, we'll get the event, we'll dispatch a biomed as a critical priority. They go out, determine if the device is in use by a patient, and once confirming it's not, request that mitigating control be implemented. And of course, then the system implements the mitigating controls, the Cloud Post or the firewall system, et cetera, whichever technologies you've deployed there. And of course, they update again our records so we know that that's been implemented. there isn't really a safe way to do 100% automated, although we could do it if you're willing to accept the risk. It's not something we recommend out of the box.
Okay, right. You showed some devices impacted by WannaCry. How do you know which operating system the medical device is impacted?
So as part of the whole vulnerability, the whole NIST, National Vulnerability Database, when they published this, I'll bring one back up. Actually, I have it in my history here. It's probably faster to get there. Yeah, so looking at the WannaCry vulnerability as an example here. Click into it here. Come on, mouse. This tells us the component. It also tells us the logical test, they call it, CP logical test here. So this tells us, as part of the National Vulnerability Database feed, exactly what explicit versions of operating systems that this particular vulnerability is affected, or affected by this vulnerability rather. We can track that to assets and correlate that to assets, because at the asset level, we also track in our technical information tag these fields. Now these fields, the common platform enumeration is what this stands for. These fields do have to be populated either during the physical inventory or onboarding process. For Windows and Linux-based devices, it's typically available at the console or admin screens. Obviously, this NIST, National Vulnerability Database matching, really only applies to medical devices using more commercial operating systems like Microsoft and Linux. For the truly proprietary devices, those manufacturers don't participate with NIST, so obviously you won't see NIST vulnerability updates or alerts based on them. But Windows, there's a lot of Windows devices out there. Collect this data either manually through your inventory process. There's also some technology solutions out there that can do passive or gentle active, as I call it, scanning of your devices to identify those Windows-based devices and generate these CPE identities into our system. So we can make recommendations on technologies partners for that as well.
Okay, now would you help us shift our data to your EAM from our current solution?
Absolutely, we do that every single day of the year for customers coming onto Nuvolo's platform. We help you export, normalize, and import that data into our system, and of course optimize it for our new data model and new capabilities so you get the full value of our solution.
Okay, can it track exactly where any network device is on the network?
So that depends, of course, on the technologies in play within your network. Obviously, any device that has an RTLS tag, a real-time location services tag, we can integrate with all those leading best-of-breed RTLS systems, and you will see that in our system. So you'll see the real-time location of the device. If it's walking down the hall with a patient, that's fine. You'll be able to see it as it gets updated by the RTLS system. That's what these map icons represent. When I click this, and it takes me to the floor map. If it's an RTLS-enabled device, that is going to be the real-time location. Obviously, for devices that aren't RTLS tagged, you can track them to a rough location with things like VLAN identifiers, but it's obviously nowhere near as precise as RTLS systems.
Okay, and another one here is, can we add attachments, service documents to each individual devices?
Absolutely, you can do that two ways. Right here at the attachments icon, we have also a managed document capability for version documents, but most importantly is, why do you want to attach those documents? The real beauty of attaching documents into a system is to be able to have them at your fingertips when you need them. And we do that at the work order level. So when a work order gets generated against a specific device, and I'm just going to pull up an example here for a device I know has, oops, helps if I can type. The device I know has what we call active knowledge. So anytime a work order gets opened against a device that has knowledge maps, we automatically will attach that document, that standard operating procedure or repair guide, right to the work order. You don't have to go looking for it. That's done by our active knowledge rules engine. So it's automatically there, both in the web interface and on our mobile device application, offline or online. So you always have it, even if you're not connected to the network.
Okay, we've got time for about one more question, Andrew. How does a system know if there are assets of the same model but different software versions that may not be affected?
Sure. So we track software versions at the asset level. So if I come in here, for example, well, I'll just pick an asset here. It'll be easier, faster to get there. So look at one of those Plum 360s, for example. So if I bring one of these up, oh, click the wrong link. Sorry, I meant to click the asset link. Let me do that. So let's go look at one of those Plum 360s, for example. So I'll click the asset record. When it loads here, give it a moment, there it comes. At the asset record, we're going to be able to show you, if I scroll down here, it's still loading here, the installed software firmware history for that asset. So we have a whole system in the admin application for managing versions. Let me just go to it here as well. The version definitions, so when a new version comes out, first time you onboard a device or you're doing your initial inventory, you populate the version definitions, you map those, and patches, of course, map those to models. So you only can apply, you only create a record in here that's applicable for this model. So we do some data integrity rules there. And then, of course, I can see it at the device level here, like exactly what version this device is at, patch included. And of course, I can also go here and see every device that I have installed software firmware records for. So we typically capture this during initial onboarding or inventory, or like I said, we can enrich the inventory with checklists on PMs and stuff to make sure that they get populated over time as well. So we track all this in the system, and of course, use that to correlate, hey, if the device at 15.1.0 is vulnerable, then we presume that older software versions or patch levels are also vulnerable. And that's usually a pretty safe assumption. It's at least you want to look at it and make sure that it's verified that it's patched up to the current patch level based on the incident, based on the event.
That's great. That's great. Well, that's about all the time we have for questions. Now, any questions we didn't have time to ask Andrew today will be sent to him, and he will answer them at his own convenience. So I'd just like to thank you, Andrew and Asim, and thank you again to today's sponsors, Nuvolo, for a great webinar. One lucky attendee will win an Amazon gift card for completing the post-webinar survey, details of which will appear on your screen shortly. You must complete the survey to obtain your certificate of attendance for your CE credit. For more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website, webinarwednesday.live. Thank you once again to everybody for attending today. Hope you have a great day and see you again soon.